Hello, everyone, and welcome to this seminar. Today, I am joined by the wonderful Tris Jarvis. So, Tris Jarvis is actually an ex-member of 23W, but more importantly, she is the lady in the know for all things nutrition because she's a clinical nutritionist and she specializes with working with women who might be experiencing different hormonal concerns. She's an expert and absolute wizard in the area of POX. She has her own business and absolutely killing it. But I just thought there is no better person to get on to lead us through a seminar where we can really start to unpack how we can optimize the nutrition and how we're actually fueling ourselves. So big welcome, Tris. How are you?
Thank you. I'm well. Thank you.
Oh, awesome. Now, guys, I'll just say quickly, if you don't already follow Tris on Instagram, you won't find her under Tris Jarvis. You'll find her under Tris Alexander Nutrition, but I will link everything for you guys. But today's format, we're going to be covering a few really, really important topics around fuels, around blood sugars, around recovery pre and post training. We'll be talking about some just really simple, convenient strategies that you guys can be navigating or using to be navigating food choices. But I guess like really helping you guys dial in to be thinking about and bringing awareness to like, how are you currently fueling yourself? How does that make you feel? And then what are some things that you can, what's some great pieces of information that you can apply to be like, oh, if I'm feeling this could be because of this, and then therefore the solution could be this. So we're hoping today you're going to walk away with a bunch of new information, things to think about, and stuff along the way. So first of all, Tris, maybe just quick intro of yourself, and yeah, what you're excited to deliver today.
Yeah, so I think intro for myself, I think you covered most of it. So I'm a holistic clinical nutritionist. I really work in the space of women's health, particularly throughout a woman's sort of reproductive and menstrual cycling years. So whether that be for preconception, fertility, postpartum kind of phase, or whether that be, I work with a lot of women with symptoms of hormonal imbalances. So whether you've been diagnosed with something like polycystic ovarian syndrome or endometriosis, or whether you're just experiencing some signs and symptoms around your cycle, whether it be like heavy or painful periods, irregular cycles, PMS, anything like that. So my work is really about deep diving into the root causes of what's going on behind that, like why is that occurring, and then using food as medicine and lifestyle approaches to be able to resolve or reduce those symptoms. So yeah, that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. All right, well, let's maybe jump in. So today I want to spend a little bit of time talking about food balance, specifically around, whether it's you want to refer to it as like macronutrient balance or portion balance, or just looking at like what your ideal plate would look like. But maybe do you want to just explain to our members what is the importance of actually making sure that you're having either a balanced meal or trying to balance out your macronutrients in the meals for that blood sugar control?
Yeah, for sure. So if you do follow me on Instagram, or if you hear me speak, I talk a lot about blood sugar balance and eating for blood sugar balance. And it's exactly what Ange spoke about. It is balancing out our macronutrients, so our protein, carbs, fats, and fibers in our meals and snacks and across the whole day to ensure that we're getting a good amount of each of those macronutrients that are going to sustain our energy, keep our blood sugars stable, which means that controls our hunger and satiety signals. So you're not getting like strong cravings or, feeling really hungry. It then also, I won't get too sciencey with you, but our blood sugar balance impacts two of our major hormones in our body as well. So it impacts insulin and it impacts cortisol. And what happens is if we are not eating regularly, or if our meals are not balanced with the right amount of macronutrients, these two hormones can fluctuate or go a little bit too high or too low. So we might get blood sugar spikes where we're getting too much sugar or glucose in the bloodstream when we get really high levels of insulin, or we might, have not eaten for hours and hours at a time, between meals. And so we're getting really low blood sugar levels where we're getting cortisol, our stress hormone, rising. And really what our body's just trying to do there is keep our blood sugar levels in a stable range, because we need to for survival. So the body works really hard to kind of, keep our blood sugar levels stable. But what then happens is, because insulin and cortisol are fluctuating, we're essentially on this like blood sugar roller coaster. That can have a downstream effect on other hormones, so even hormones related to our menstrual cycle. And it, as I mentioned, like can impact our hunger and satiety. It can contribute to cravings, but it can also, if you're, aiming to build muscle or maintain muscle mass, too much cortisol can also contribute to muscle breakdown. And so we really want to preserve our muscle mass, both from, I guess, a training perspective, like for improving our training performance, but also for lifestyle and longevity. We really want to maintain and build muscle mass throughout our life as well. So I guess that's the importance. I hope that kind of makes sense as like a brief
totally
explanation
does.
of blood sugar balance. Aside from that, sorry.
No, go for it. Go for it.
I was just going to say,
answer this next.
Aside from that, the other reason why we want to ensure that our meals are macronutrient balanced is so we're actually getting enough protein, getting enough carbs, getting enough fibers, getting enough fats. And I can explain the importance of each of those macronutrients as well, if that's helpful. So I'm just wondering. Actually, I might go through each macronutrient first before. I've got a little diagram to kind of make it a little bit easier. But, if we're looking at our fiber, so fiber, which mostly comes from fruit and vegetables, is really important for our gut health. We know our gut health plays a huge role in overall health. It also provides us with lots of vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants, so all those micronutrients for our body to function optimally. Our proteins, we know protein is really important for building and maintaining lean muscle mass, and that also improves our metabolic health. So, as we age, we tend to become a little bit more insulin resistant, but when we preserve muscle mass, we reduce that effect from happening. So, regardless of whether you're trying to build or maintain muscle mass, protein is really important for that. But protein is actually also important for the production of hormones and also to support detoxification pathways as well. So both really important processes in the body. Fats, we need healthy fats. They help us to absorb vitamins A, D, E, and K. So we don't absorb those nutrients unless we have fats in the diet. It's also important, again, for the production of hormones because our fats, like the backbone of our hormones, essentially is made from cholesterol, and we get that from fats. And fats are also important for cell communication. So every cell in our body needs to communicate to function optimally. And then our carbs, we mostly provides us with energy. Like I'm talking like complex carbs or sugary carbs here, mostly provides us with energy, both for the brain and body. And a lot of complex carbs will provide you with fiber for gut health as well.
What would you say would be some of like the most common things that would indicate that like you might need to work on that blood sugar balance, therefore really thinking about the composition of those macronutrients in the meals that you're having? What are some of the things that would be like the flags?
Like symptoms that you might be? If you're getting any like energy slumps, cravings during the day, like if you're getting to 3 o'clock in the afternoon and you're like craving sugar, craving like, needing a pick-me-up, it's probably related to the amount of food or the macronutrients you've eaten earlier on in the day. If you're, like struggling with like concentration, focus, could be related to macronutrients as well. I guess that from a short-term perspective. Whenever it comes to even symptoms of hormonal imbalances, I'm always looking at macronutrient balance and blood sugar balance as like an absolute foundation.
Yeah. And I think like from my perspective, what I notice is that if I don't pay attention to how I'm fueling my body, and maybe go too long without eating, or possibly not have enough protein in a meal or enough fat in a meal, I'll have those huge energy drops, and it might be coming close to the time where I've got to eat, but I consume everything else beforehand because I feel so depleted. So it's like one of those things that you've got to really pay attention to, like the early signals that your body's telling you. And especially like, I mean, a lot of people watching this doing our challenges and they've got a specific body composition goal in mind. Your ability to lose weight is very much dependent on being able to stay within a certain calorie target that's set based on you being in that energy deficit. So making sure that you can keep your blood sugar levels nice and neutral, where you don't get those massive like peaks and troughs, is super important, because as soon as you go for too long, it's very hard to make good choices.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. If you are in a calorie deficit for weight loss, it's going to be so much easier to stick to that if your blood sugars are balanced, because you're not getting those like insatiable cravings. You're not getting, I can tell you, one of the biggest things I see is women getting to sort of that afternoon, or they get home from work and they're making dinner and they're like consuming everything from the pantry in the fridge while they're making dinner because they're so insatiably hungry. They eat dinner, and then the evening is where they're doing a lot of snacking into the evening, and it's because they actually haven't fueled and nourished themselves enough during the day.
Because you're so busy, like you're doing 1,000 things. Like in the morning, you may have not spent enough time really thinking about your breakfast because you've got to get kids ready and get them fueled, and then you get to work, and then there's 1,000 things, and then it's highly possible you get to the back end of your day and you end up back ending a lot of your calories. And in one way of thinking, you go, well, I haven't eaten that much throughout the day, so and I need to eat something. So, but unfortunately, what we see with the data is that back ending your calories like that at the end of the day, you've already had your blood sugar levels on that like spiral. But it's usually a precursor to end up consuming way more calories than what your body perhaps needed.
Yeah, for sure. I see it in clinic. I see it with the women that I work with, but it's also reflected in the research as well. So there's a lot of research in eating, for example, eating a higher protein, bigger breakfast, consuming more of your calories earlier on in the day, and that being more beneficial for weight loss, weight maintenance, and other health markers. But also showing that if you fast too long in the morning, if you skip breakfast, that also leads to over consuming calories for the totality of the day. So even though you've skipped, or not eaten very much during the day, what tends to happen, like you said, is just an overconsumption of energy later on in the day.
And like, yeah, you end up experiencing all the bad symptoms of dieting, which is like, low energy and feeling a bit crazy, but without the weight loss, which, is very sad. Especially if that's what you're really trying to focus in on. So what are some practical tips for getting that right balance?
Yes, yeah. I'll share my screen because I've got a little diagram.
Let's do it.
It should have explained the ratios of each of those macronutrients in two really simple ways. So I'll share with you, and this is obviously generalized. If you have your macronutrients set by your coach or for this challenge, you may need to slightly adjust these portion sizes. But in general, this is going to give you a pretty good ratio of like, if your macronutrients are set, it's probably going to give you a good ratio of around that sort of 30-ish% protein, and then the rest balance between carbs and fats. So again, you may need to adjust that slightly, but yeah, I'll just share my screen. Let me just open this. I think I need to open this to presenter. Is that going to let me do that? No.
Last week we did a Zoom, our first one, and it took me a solid amount of time to be like, okay, how do I share my screen again? What am I sharing here?
Okay. I'm not sure what you guys can see. Hang on.
Yeah, we can see this. This is great.
Can you, I'm just wondering though, are you seeing just the slides or are you
No,
seeing
I'm also seeing notes.
well?
Yeah.
Okay. Hmm, hang on. I wonder if I need to open this first. I swear I've practiced this so many times.
It's more than fine. As I
And
said
I
last
never
week, I
get
was
it
like,
quite
oh
right.
my goodness, I feel like a newbie doing all this
Yeah,
again.
yeah.
And then they change where little buttons are located. That's perfect. Yeah,
That is that all right like that?
that's so great. Yep.
Okay, so just to give you, I guess, that overview of like what a healthy macronutrient balanced plate looks like. You would be looking at about half a plate of your fiber or non-starchy veggies. So any veggies except for like your potato, your sweet potato, your pumpkin. I wouldn't worry so much about, carrots and peas and things. I would still consider them as non-starchy. So just anything, and give yourself a good variety and a diverse amount of those non-starchy veggies. Yeah, I always say half a plate. If we're looking at sort of cup sizes, you're aiming for around 2 cups. I say 2 cups as well because often we don't get that in breakfast. So if we kind of get lunch and dinner 2 cups, we're getting closer to that, that amount of veggies that we need, or 1 to 2 open handfuls. So like a good amount of non-starchy veg. Proteins, we're looking at about a quarter of a plate. I tend to go with hands portions for protein. It's a lot easier to really actually get that adequate amount of protein in. So I say a whole hand and a whole, like your palm and your whole hand full of protein per meal. If you're looking at weighing, like if you're tracking your foods, it might be around about that 150 grams raw weight of an animal protein. I do have another slide that I'll show you later on that just gives you a bit more of a breakdown of protein in different foods as well, like per 100 grams. And you're more than welcome to screenshot these as well, so you can keep them if you're watching or rewatching. So yeah, healthy fats, we're looking at about 2 tablespoons or thumbfuls. So your sort of whole thumb there, 2 tablespoons. If you're looking at something like avocado or nuts, it's about a quarter of an avocado or 20-ish nuts, if you want to be, a little bit specific. And then complex carbs. I would say complex carbs is where it's going to differ depending on how active you are, whether you've got insulin resistance or anything else underlying there. But like as a general guide, I sort of say another quarter of a plate, half a cup or like a cupped palmful of complex carbs. You actually may need more if you're highly active. Like I'm assuming, Ange, that you probably have more than that. Like maybe like, I don't know, I sometimes go for like a good cup size.
Yeah.
So if you're aiming to lose weight, it might be that smaller portion, half a cup. If you're maintaining weight, more like a cupful.
Yeah. And it kind of, we'll probably cover this in a moment, but for me, it varies. The complex carb component will definitely vary in and around training.
Yeah.
So I'll get my biggest serve of carbs after training, especially if I'm gunning for some sort of body composition fat loss goal, where I really want to optimize everything I'm doing.
Yeah, perfect. I absolutely agree with that. I think, this is good as like that general guide for, the predominant of your meals. And then from there, you can adjust as needed. And we'll talk about pre and post training fueling as well. Just as like a sort of, I guess, your hand size portions, like I kind of explained them anyway, but, your non-starchy veg, like, the whole handful protein, like I said, whole hand and palm, your carbs like that sort of palmful, fistful, and then the healthy fats is 1 or 2 thumbfuls. And that's for your general meal. So that might be slightly different pre and post training as well.
Yeah. Yeah, cool.
Let me just stop sharing and see if I've got, I think that was the only sort of slides I wanted to cover for that specifically. Do you want me to talk about like, I guess, optimal protein intake in the sense of like, if you were tracking like grams as well?
I feel like possibly our members, and I think perhaps I may have covered that last week. And that is something that when we go through and we do our in-body scans, we do talk to our members about that. So if you're not sure how much protein you should be having, and you have done one of our in-body scans, generally we look at like the lean body mass on the data that's getting presented to us. And depending on where you're coming in, it's in general, we say 2 times your lean body mass, if you know what your lean body mass is. So if you look at the in-body scan and it says your lean body mass is 50 kilos, we go, okay, generally speaking, it's 2 times that. Would you say that that's a good rule of thumb, Tris?
Yeah, absolutely. I think accurately, yes. If you haven't had an in-body scan, you can also, also tend to go even that 2 grams per kilo of total body weight, which is a little bit higher again. You can go a little bit less, 1.8 to 2 grams. So it is a little bit obviously higher again. But if you're training quite often, you're going to utilize that protein. We don't store protein as fats. It's not really used as an energy macronutrient. It can be converted to glucose if the body really needs it, like if you're on a very low carbohydrate diet, but we don't tend to store it. So if you are healthy, if you don't have any kidney problems, there's not actually any issues in consuming that a little bit higher amount of protein. So I wouldn't be too stressed. I think some women do sort of worry a little bit like, oh, am I eating too much protein? But it is actually hard to over consume protein and to really hit that upper limit of protein.
Yeah, totally. Well, maybe let's chat a little bit about like pre and post fueling, and how our members could be thinking about maybe what they're having before they train, as a starter, and then we'll chat about post training.
Yes. Yep. So pre-training, if fueling pre-training is going to depend a little bit upon when you train. So whether you've actually eaten, if you're training later in the afternoon might differ from first thing in the morning. So I guess just starting with, if it is first thing in the morning, I recommend not training fasted. And I know that's a little bit of a controversial topic, but honestly, if you want to maximize your training, if you want to maximize recovery, if you want to also keep blood sugar levels balanced, then I recommend as a general rule, not training fasted. All you need is a small, like 15 to 30 gram carbohydrate snack. So something that is easy to digest in a short amount of time, in that sort of 30 to 45 minutes pre-training, if you can. And that's if you're training first thing in the morning. So, and again, this is like optimal. So, a lot of women struggle, a lot of people struggle eating first thing in the morning, but it can be something really small. So it might be half to 1 banana or a piece of fruit. It might be a piece of toast with a little bit of like jam or honey. A medjool date is a really good one, or like a rice cake with a little bit of like jam or honey. They're all, they're not complex carbs. So they are quite, I don't want to say like they're sugary. They contain sugar because they are quick and easy to digest. And that's why we're having it within that 30 to 45 minute window before training, because your body will utilize that for training for fuel. That'll go into your bloodstream, and the sugar will be in your bloodstream as you're starting to train, and your body will use it. So you're not then getting that insulin spike. Whereas if you were to sort of, eat some rice cakes with honey in the middle of, I don't know, in between meals without anything else, depending on how much you've had, you may get that sort of spike in blood sugar. Does that make sense? I don't know what your thoughts are around like training fasted, Ange.
Yeah, well, I definitely think the fitter and the stronger you become, the more you realize the difference that it does make with your performance in the gym. And I think when you're first starting out, it all feels different, new, but I would definitely struggle to be able to train properly. So yeah, I definitely, if I'm coming in for like a 6 a.m. workout, I have a piece of toast with some honey on it, maybe a little bit of peanut butter as well. And I love that because I don't normally eat that. I don't normally eat that post meal. So I just think, I'm going to enjoy this, and I'm going to like use this to really power through my workout.
For sure. There was something I was going to say on that. Sorry. Oh, I know what I was going to say. The other reason why I sort of suggest not to train fasted is if you are trying to build or maintain muscle mass, if you're training fasted often, what is happening? So when we first wake up in the morning, our cortisol is naturally high. And then go into a training session without eating, that cortisol is going to continue to rise. And like I said, with blood sugar balance, our body needs to keep our blood sugars within a certain range. So it will raise cortisol even more to break down stored glycogen, so stored sugar in both the liver and the muscles to be able to fuel your body's needs. And in doing so, it can break down some muscle tissue at the same time. So like I said, like we're really trying to preserve that like lean muscle mass. So that's why I tend to say, especially if you're doing quite a hard training session, fueling beforehand is really beneficial.
I remember reading once that also, eating is a great way to help bring down that natural rise in cortisol that happens in the morning. Is that true, Tris?
Yeah, exactly. And that's why, if you're, I mean, this is going a little bit off topic, but with fasting, if we fast too long in the mornings, we are, increasing cortisol and, look, that's probably a whole nother topic, but it does. When you eat,
totally,
it brings down that natural rise in cortisol.
Yeah. Nice. And would you say that you need to have anything with a little bit of protein in it as a pre-training, or would it just sort of depend on time of day? If you're training first thing in the morning, maybe just something with a little bit of carbs, but maybe later on, would you have anything with a bit of protein in it, or is it not as critical?
You can. I would say if it's first thing in the morning, you really want those carbs digested quite quickly. So a protein shake with it would be totally fine. If it's anything sort of like an animal protein, it's going to take quite a long time to digest. So if you've only got that sort of 30, 45-minute window, I wouldn't be eating a full meal, but like a protein shake or a protein smoothie would be absolutely fine. If you're training later in the day, whether it's the day, the afternoon, the evening, it's going to depend a little bit on how long ago your last meal was. So if you've eaten a full meal with like protein, carbs, and fats in the last couple of hours before training, you may not need a snack. Training. You may like to have something, just carbs, like a small amount of carbs, but if you've eaten a full meal a couple of hours before training, you may not need it. That's really going to be, I guess, then dependent on your training intensity, how much you've eaten, whether you're hungry. Do you know what I mean? It's going to be a bit of a personalized.
And if I dare say, if you're coming in for a gym workout, it's if you've eaten like just using specifics, if you've woken up, you've had breakfast at say 7, 8 a.m. and then you're coming in to train at 10 and 11, that session's lasting, 45 minutes to an hour, there's probably a really good chance that you don't need to pre-fuel before that training session because you've had breakfast, and that should be fine, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, for sure. If you've had breakfast, training, a few hours after that, you're probably going to be fine, and then have a meal within an hour of finishing training. And we can talk about post fueling.
Let's chat about post now. So a lot of people hear about the training, the post recovery window. How important do you think that window is in terms of consuming something high protein post workout?
Yeah, I definitely think it's important getting that protein in post workout. I think there's a little bit of, I would say if you can get in a full meal within an hour post training, that's going to be optimal. That's going to be ideal. Couple of reasons. So post training, we really want to repair any of those micro tears that are made, the muscle micro tears that are made during training. So we're getting muscle repair. We definitely want to be including a decent amount of protein, so at least 30 grams of protein, and I'll talk a little bit more about that with that meal, because if we're getting about 30 grams of protein, we're also, if it's animal protein, we're also going to be getting about 3 grams of an amino acid called leucine.
Mm.
and that will stimulate muscle protein synthesis. So you're actually stimulating that repair and growth of new muscle tissue, which is what we want, particularly post-training. If you're predominantly plant-based or you're eating plant-based proteins, I would aim for more than that, a little bit more than that 30 grams. And that's really just because plant-based proteins don't quite contain as much leucine in there as animal-based protein. So you're probably looking at like 40 grams of protein.
Would you say for somebody that does eat a plant-based diet, would you say that it would be a good idea for them to be also making sure they're having some sort of BCAA, like so that they're topping up on leucine, or is, like, this is going to sound like a really silly question, one I probably should know the answer to, but I don't. Like, does leucine come in non-animal products?
Yeah, it does. It's not a silly question at all. It does. So the animal-based proteins are higher bioavailable. So that means that we digest and absorb a lot more of the protein compared to plant-based foods. It's not to say that plant-based proteins are not great for us, because they are. It's just that we do need to actually consume more. So if you are predominantly plant-based or completely like vegan, I would be aiming for that higher amount of total protein across your day just to get more of that protein in. There is leucine, so that amino acid, there is leucine in plant-based proteins, but it's one of the amino acids that is in lower amounts in plant-based proteins. So again, that's why, like, per meal, we want to increase the protein amount so we're getting more of that leucine in. It doesn't need to be significant. Like I said, it's probably the difference between about 30 grams of protein in your meal to about 40 to 45 grams of protein, just to reach the leucine target.
And I think, like, one thing I'd probably like to add in this, and I guess it's marketing sometimes, but sometimes for women, like, they think about protein shakes, and they think about, like, gym bros, and so they pick a protein powder based off, like, what is being marketed towards them, or they pick one that they think is going to be, like, cleaner, and so they opt for a vegan based protein, and, like, as a powder. And it's a great option if you are vegan, or if you are vegetarian, or if you're intolerant to whey-based proteins. But you are better off if you are eating meat in the diet and you are fine with lactose, that you are much better off to pick a whey-based protein powder, because it is higher in leucine, which is the reason why you're taking it, for that post-recovery. It's an interesting one that, as I said, sometimes people buy a protein powder based off what's, like, it seems like the best option. As opposed to actually looking at the science behind it.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I would say, just, I guess, in terms of picking a protein, if you, whey isolate would be the best. You can go whey concentrate. It is a little bit cheaper. Whey isolate, you're getting the maximum amount of protein content, minimum. There's next to no carbs and fats in there, and that's really what we want out of protein powder, that is, particularly if you're using it post-workout. Yes, ideally, if you can, opt for ones that don't contain sort of fillers and all these additives and things like that. But you can get some pretty good quality whey proteins. Like, I think that's pretty readily available. I would even say most people a lot of people can digest whey isolate. It does have a very, very minimal lactose content. So even if you are lactose intolerant, a lot of people can still digest whey isolate. If you are struggling, if you are struggling and you're finding you're getting digestive symptoms, that's when we may consider, like, a plant-based.
And sometimes it could just be the brand,
Exactly.
So just because you have, some gut upsets on a brand doesn't mean necessarily all whey or whey protein powders, especially if you're going for that whey isolate, as you just said, will cause that. So the best way, especially being in our community, is you could ask what people use and see if people can bring in a little sample so that you can try some before buying, a big tub. But, for those that have never bought protein powder before, like, you can expect to pay somewhere around $100 for a 4-liter tub. you know, which obviously sounds very scary, but like it lasts forever, especially if you're the only one using it. And it's like a meal that you don't actually need to make. So it's a pretty good thing to have in your cupboard.
Yeah. Yeah, I find it really convenient, particularly like when you're busy and you're just trying to reach that protein, you know, your protein target, or, you know, I mean, I find it really easy to use adding into like smoothies or like oats, things
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
that, just to
totally.
increase the protein in a really easy, convenient way.
Yeah. Nice. Okay. So
Oh,
maybe I'm just looking at the time. Let's chat briefly about just navigating food choices just in general. You know, when you're in the supermarkets or looking for convenience foods,
mhm.
what would you say are some of your like hot tips in just helping to find healthier food swaps?
Yeah.
To make it just a bit easier to make all this work in a busy life.
Yeah. I would say, just as a general guide, you know, if we're talking about, like, obviously if we're talking about optimal health, look at the ingredients on a food label, on packaged foods. There's plenty, like, you might hear a lot about, you know, packaged and processed foods aren't great for us. And that's more like the ultra processed foods. If we're looking at, like, there's plenty of convenience and packaged foods that, you know, are healthy and nutritious as well. If you
Oh no, Tris, you've just dropped out. So poor Tris does live in an area that is that was affected by the high winds yesterday. So we'll just see if she's coming back. And just give her a moment. Oh, there you go. She's back. Yeah,
sorry.
that's okay. That's all right. I just thought at the start I should have mentioned that yeah, Tris is probably going to drop out at some point. But I think
Yeah,
we've
yeah.
done well. Yeah, go for it. All over
Yeah.
to you.
We've done all right. Yeah, yeah, sorry about that, guys. I'm in the power outage black spot over here.
Yeah.
So I don't know where it froze and where I was up to, but I might just start from the beginning of that. So generally, like, I guess optimal health, you know, even when you're looking at packaged and convenience foods, if you can, like, reducing the amount of like preservatives, additives, colors, seed oils, is optimal. It's not always possible. So there's a couple of things I'd look at on the label, I guess, of food. So yeah, first, ingredients. Has it got minimal ingredients? Are they mostly whole foods? Ingredients on a label is listed in order of largest to smallest. So if you're sort of looking at, like, you know, sugar content and things like that, have a look at the actual, like, where it is on the ingredients list, because it's yeah, most largest to smallest by weight.
Oh, interesting.
Comparing like brands of the same products as well, you know, even if we're looking at things like, you know, your plant-based milks or your yogurts and things like that, it might be the same product, but if you have a look on the labels, there might be quite a difference in things that are added to it, whether it's sugars or whether it's other sort of additives. So just comparing brands of the same product can help you find like the best choice. I always recommend, there is a really great Instagram and app called Supermarket Swaps.
Oh,
And they
cool.
make things so easy. Like, when it comes to ingredients, when it comes to foods, when it comes to brands and products and choosing like the best alternative, Supermarket Swaps is like my absolute go-to.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
yeah, super simple. If you're looking at it from a macronutrient point of view, that's when you can start to compare the information on the nutrition panel. So looking at compare the panel that's per 100 grams. So what I mean by that is, for example, if you're choosing between yogurts and you're wanting a high protein yogurt, have a look at the protein content per 100 grams on the label and compare that. Because sometimes, you know, a Greek yogurt might only contain 5 grams per 100 grams of protein, and then you might get a high protein Greek yogurt that contains like 10 grams per 100 grams. Do you know what I mean? So if you're sort of aiming for certain macronutrients, that's a really good way to compare products and compare labels. I guess from a convenience perspective, particularly when you're busy, you know, aside from, and I'm sure you've talked a lot about meal planning and prep as well to make things easier, but aside from, I guess, your meal planning and prep, you can utilize like pre-made meals, or, you know, food delivery services to make things a lot more easy and convenient. There's a couple of brands, you know, even in the supermarket that I quite like. There's one called Dynamic, and they make some really healthy, nutritious meals, both in the fridge and the freezer section. Some of them are like pre-made, so you're like your actual pre-made meals, and some of them are like you know, they do this really nice like beef chili con carne where it's like feeds a family, and you might add some rice or some veggies and things to that. So they've got some really good options for things like that you can, you know, make things a lot easier.
Oh, good tips. They're great. Yeah, because I think that's the thing is you just need to find a system that just actually works for you. And if you're sitting there going, oh, I just don't have any time in the morning. And yeah, so I can't do that. It's like, well, you've got to find a system that you can work to, and whether that's, you know, have something ready to grab and go, or but you don't have to do all the things all at once. You just have to think about what's the most important thing and focus in on that, without trying to overwhelm yourself or feeling let down, as inevitably some of us do when we're like, oh, I can't, like, you know, my work's too stressful, my kids are not doing what they should be doing, you know, it's all too much. It's like, well, you're never going to get there unless you just improve things incrementally over time. And then once you do, you move on to the next thing. As opposed to just kind of going, oh, it's too much, it's all too hard. And the awesome thing is, like, you know, there's so many options available to us nowadays, that, and little, like, you know, time-saving hacks. And like sometimes those hacks might be a little bit more expensive, like, for example, buying a ready-made meal that's ready to go. But at the same time, that buying that meal could also stop you from getting, say, Uber Eats, or stop you from getting sick later on, or all those other things, or, you know, things that you can't really put a price on, like your sanity. So, you know, sometimes it's a bit of a game of give and take, really, isn't it?
Yeah, or I think it's always that juggle between, or that balance between, yeah, like what's most important, what your goal is right now, and what we, you know, can worry about at another stage, like one thing at a time. If we try and do everything at once, like you said, you get overwhelmed. And then if you're not sort of following through, like if you're trying to do so many different things and you're not able to follow through because you've given yourself too many things and it's unachievable, it kind of sends this message back to yourself of like, oh, I failed, and I haven't achieved that, and we lose confidence in ourselves. But if we do one thing at a time, it builds our confidence and our self-trust of like, yeah, cool, I can follow through on that, and now I've got that set, I can, you know, move on to the next thing. But it really is just about working out like what's your priority at this time. You don't have to be quote unquote perfect. There's no perfect diet. There's no perfect way of doing things. You know, so it's really just, let's start with the foundations and then kind of build from there, like one step at a time. Even when it comes to like, you know, I talk a lot about, you know, whole foods and things for health, whether that be for your body composition goals or just optimal health goals. You don't have to be 100%, you know, it's not, your whole diet doesn't need to be 100% whole foods. If you aim for that sort of like 80-20 rule, include some, you know, snacks and, you know, treats and things in there, you're going to reach those goals. You're going to have optimal health. You don't need to be 100% perfect with it.
Yeah. And like, you know, your cortisol levels play in there as well. Like how we started it, you know, your cortisol levels definitely affect your blood glucose levels as well. So like if you're making sure that you're not stressing out over the little things and just taking time to be a bit more zen, that also can definitely help with how we're feeling and how we're metabolizing the foods that we're fueling our body with. 100%. Awesome. Well, I feel like we've covered so many juicy topics. I'm not sure if anyone that's joining us live actually has any questions that they would like to share. But from here, if you do have any questions for me or for Tris, you can definitely reach out to Tris directly. As I said, I'll include her notes with how you can find her either over Instagram or directly through her website or over email. Tris is our highly recommended nutritionists that we work with. So if you would like someone to spend a little bit more one-on-one time, just going through where you're at, some of the things you're experiencing, definitely reach out to Tris and organize a consultation just directly through her. But otherwise, if you have any questions that you want us to ask Tris, we can also filter them through as well. But Tris, did you have anything else you wanted to finish off with?
No, I think we've covered a lot. I think the main takeaway to not overwhelm anyone is really just like pick what's most important for your goals and where you're at and what your capacity is to make any changes are right now and go from there.
Yeah, love that. Thank you so much for joining us, Tris. Gorgeous as always. Can't wait to touch base with you and get you working back with the community, maybe face to face, maybe back on our podcast. But thanks for joining us, everyone who's listening in, and have a great day.
Thanks.
And I will hit stop record. Please tell me that was recording. Host request to record to the cloud. Oh no, hopefully.
Do I need to press stop recording?
Can you see if it's been recording?
Saying recording and there's a stop button. Do you want me to press stop?
Yes, do that. I was freaking out.
Or do you want to change yourself back to host and then
good idea. Let me do that.
So
Let me do that.
Just because I want to make sure it obviously like records to you and to you.
Yeah, got it. Got it. I go to the participants. Everyone gets to listen in on this bit. Chat pin. Maybe you've got to sign it back to me.
Okay, mate. Yep. Here we go. Yep.
Okay.
Change host. You're the host now. You stop.
Oh, phew. Because like on